Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. I'm Kate,
And I'm Stephanie.
and together we're Three Heads. Today we're continuing a conversation we started on our podcast about making the textbook work for you. You have a curriculum, you have a certain number of texts that you need to teach or choose from to teach. You may be limited in when you have access to them or how long you have access to them for. So, how do you get your limited resources to work for you? That's what we're talking about today.
And we're going to give you some specific examples of how we've done this. We gave you the broad information in the podcast. Here we get to actually share some details that maybe you can borrow or be inspired by. So the first thing that we like to do is if you have access to a platform that you can offload your content into, where you can then add things like videos, you can edit the questions to make them work for you. We found that that is a really helpful way.
Mhm.
If the text is maybe inaccessible to students, it's a great way to add some videos that provide background information or increase engagement. It also lets you take the textbook questions and fiddle with them a little bit. I know we had an online textbook where you couldn't modify anything. And
Right.
so we found it helpful to offload that into another platform, which can be time consuming, but you do it once and then it's there, and
Absolutely.
you can continue to reuse that in future years.
Right. It's often helpful for students. It's maybe the question isn't particularly hard, but because it's sort of out of
Mhm.
context, they're struggling with it. But if you put it right near where the
Yeah.
information is, then all of a sudden a question that is super hard to answer becomes much
Yeah.
easier to answer. Maybe if they saw a link to a website or to a
Yeah.
video about a particular idea that's being
Mhm.
addressed in the text, then that can be helpful to students. And it makes the experience of
Mhm.
engaging with the text much more like their real life.
Mhm.
They spend the majority of their life
Yeah.
online. They are digital natives. They are used to being able to click screens and their touch screens
Watch
and
videos.
watch videos and find answers to questions based on clicking in links
Yeah.
and seeing recommendations on their YouTube page or whatever. And so, if you sort of, in the academic way,
Mhm.
try to incorporate that, you're going to find that your students are more receptive to something that if it was just on a page
Yeah.
in a book, they wouldn't be receptive to.
Yeah. And it allows you then to manipulate that curriculum, so you're not
Mhm.
starting from scratch, but you're able to make changes to it you couldn't in
For
another
sure.
circumstance.
Absolutely. Lots of times we also, as English teachers, work on building skills. Maybe we're going to introduce a unit where we're going to be discussing conflict or
Mhm.
theme or something like that. And we don't feel confident that our students really have an understanding of that particular topic.
Mhm.
As many of you know, and certainly if you've spent more than 1 year in a classroom, you know that what happened in the year previous might as well
That
have
never happened.
never happened. They have no carryover. They do, but they don't recognize it
Mhm.
as any carryover. And so, this is an opportunity for you to break from your text
Mhm.
and bring in some high interest text, for
Yes.
lack of a better word. We started doing this when we had been reading, well, we had been reading
Yeah.
the same story for several years and had sort of had enough of it. But it was a story that students never really engaged
Yeah.
in the way certainly the textbook publishers intended,
Yeah.
but even in the way that we thought they would engage
Yeah.
with it, they just didn't.
It was also really long.
Very long for what
What?
we needed it to accomplish.
Yeah.
And so we decided we're going to make a break with tradition and we are going to use a television show
Mhm.
to introduce this concept. And it sort of kicked off the year and it brought about the sort of acknowledgement that not everything you do
Yeah.
in your ELA class has to be academic,
Yeah.
strictly academic.
Or that the only kind of stories are in books, because increasingly as we get more digital, we get more online, I think it's becoming increasingly common to see things like television, to see things like movies as literary in a sense, or as worthy of analysis.
You would also not be surprised probably to know that students remember things from films that they watch, or episodes of TV shows that they watch, or songs that they listen to far more than they remember the story in a book.
We've also found it tends to be for things like irony that are challenging to wrap your head around. It was a lot easier for them to grasp the concept using like a comedy TV show and then applying it to a text, as opposed to just trying to do it from a short story the first time around. It was also helpful because I think we got to a point where we needed to crunch a couple of units together. And so what we did is, okay, well, instead of this story is going to teach plot and this one's going to take character, let's do a little skills lesson with this TV show that kind of accomplishes both. And then we can read one story and look at both plot and character, instead of feeling like we needed to treat those as two separate units.
Absolutely.
Another thing we like to do is sometimes the texts are fine, the some of the materials are fine. It's just a weird like thematic focus. Maybe they have given a question that is really maybe just real kind of superficial for what the text is. It's a tenuous link between them. And so, we have made an effort to rewrite those questions sometimes, just to say, yeah, the unit is fine, but it needs a different focus to it. We can fiddle with this theme a little bit, or maybe, okay, well, we use the text in the book and it's getting a little outdated. How can we supplement that one with a more current example, instead of just feeling stuck with what's there.
Yeah, I think oftentimes textbook writers and publishers try to supplement with sort of timely text. But as we all know, it takes a long time to adopt a textbook, and you have a textbook for a long time, whether that's digital or it's your traditional paper text. And so something that 5 years ago was really relevant and really engaging to students is no longer relevant or engaging to students. And so sometimes if you can just update those supplementary texts, you can get a few more years out of your textbook, which is oftentimes something that we as teachers need to do.
Yes. Trying to milk it for all it's worth.
Absolutely.
Another thing that we have done before is, one time we were asked by the district to use a specific curriculum that was really heavy on reading and writing. And we were noticing it's English, that's of course.
Fair enough.
But as we were looking at the unit, it was like, this is going to be a struggle to really engage students. Like, it was good lessons, it was good activities, but it felt like a lot of the same thing every single day. And we could see, especially our students who don't love English, who don't love reading and struggle with writing, really kind of burning out on the unit. And so what we did is we took a discussion question or a little activity that we saw in there and tried to turn it into like an artistic project. Not necessarily a big, huge thing, but I mean, there was one about rites of passage. So it was like, okay, well, let's just have them make a timeline of rites of passage in their life. There was one we did about conformity. So we had them make a little like graphic of how much of a conformist am I? And so it was still on topic, but it just kind of helped break up what was going to be really hard to get students to stay engaged for that full period of time.
Yeah, I think there are two things that are related to that, and I'm probably going to forget what the two things are. I shouldn't have said two things. I think that when you are looking at your unit, whether it's a unit you created or a textbook, but when you're looking, let's say, we won't put it on us. We never come up with anything that doesn't work or isn't good. You're looking at your textbook and you're thinking to yourself, this is really repetitive, or this is going to get really old. That's going to be amplified in your students. Yeah. So if you're thinking to yourself, we're going to have to do this again. We're going to have to read this same part of the text again. Yeah. Your students are going to feel that way to a higher degree. And of course, I forgot what the second one was.
Well, and I'm
Don't
just thinking
remember.
it's, I mean, I think we have to put so much energy into like creating buy-in and selling what we're doing, that when we're having trouble selling it, like,
Yes.
it's absolutely going to be difficult to sell it to them.
Yes. I remember what my second
I thought
thing
if I
was.
vamped, you might.
So my second thing is on the topic of artistic
Oh yeah.
projects. We are not big on the artistic projects, but there is a time and a place for them. And sort of our approach has always been, we're not big on artistic projects as the culmination of the unit. For us as high school teachers, it's hard to get yourself into that mind frame. For us, it's hard to get ourselves into the mind frame of, this is how I'm going to determine that my student is college ready, because that's what their grades in high school are determining. C or better means you're ready for college. And for us, and maybe we just didn't ever come up with the right kind of project. We had a really hard time coming up with a project that was artistic that would accomplish that. We did try a couple of times in AP and it just didn't work out. So that could be our failing. However, that doesn't mean that there's no place for any sort of artistic or creative project. Make that, as Stephanie said, something that's not time consuming. You're going to spend weeks and weeks on this, but something that lets students sort of flex a different muscle in your classroom can be very helpful.
It's really great when you are recognizing you're going to need to turn around work real fast. And so you need to buy yourself a couple days to be able to grade or give feedback. That can be a really good time to throw those in also, to kind of give everyone a breather that is still purposeful.
Yes. Yes.
And then our last one, actually, you should do this because I really like the way you phrased it in your notes.
When all else fails, and we might have talked about this briefly in the podcast, but when all else fails, cut your losses and replace a text. If you have spent some time and put in some real effort, probably not literally, because once you've literally put in the effort,
then you're not going to abandon it.
Just go with it. But you've put in some mental effort to think, how can I make this interesting or engaging for students? How can I make this relevant for students? And you just can't figure out a way. And you've talked to the other people in your grade level. You've maybe talked to somebody who taught this class last year. How did you make this? If you are just drawing blanks, replace. Choose something that you're going to buy into, that you'll be able to get your students to buy into, that's going to work for you. There are times where you just need to cut your losses and go a different direction.
And a lot of times you don't have to just go from scratch on that. A lot of times your textbook will come with like recommended additional reading and things like that you can pull from, which is oftentimes easier to get district approval on when you can pull from a curriculum that has been recommended already. So use those sections as well, those kind of recommended reading or additional resources. Those can be a great place to look for often actually more contemporary high interest texts as well.
Right. So hopefully you found this to be helpful. Hopefully it's getting some wheels turning for you. If you have some ideas of your own, you think we skipped over something, you have a fantastic artistic project that does show a student is college eligible, we would love to know about it. Tell us about it in the comments down below. Thanks so much. See you soon. Bye. Everybody get in their places. Thank you.